Hi, it's Mrs. Chang here. So today we're looking at an interactive website that's going to look at Toronto and different aspects of our heavy rainfall. I chose this site to work on because it's a great example of how a story map type of interactive site is used. So the stuff we're doing on ArcGIS, where we put maps, pictures, videos, any of that kind of stuff, it's being used in the professional world too, and that's probably the way that newspapers are going to be more engaging in the future. So this article is from the Toronto Star. I'll take you there in a moment, but to give you an idea of what we're doing is we're practicing using how to find information when an article is longer. Okay, so when you first look at the article, I'll take you there now. So if you want to click on it, you click there and the link should work. I'll also post the link in the Google Classroom if it doesn't work for some reason. So you'll see that this is actually a really long article. So like if you take a look at it, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, Mrs. Chang, why do you hate me? Don't panic. I'm not expecting you to necessarily read the whole thing. It's not a really crazy long read. I've read it in about 10-15 minutes, but I know for some students that's too much and some of the vocabulary might be a little bit more challenging. So what do I want to teach us today? When we get a large piece of text, whether you go to college later in life or university, you're going to get stuff that requires you to think about where do I find that information. So what I do when I see an article is I look for the headings first, okay? And this is really important to me. I ask some questions. Who published this article? So it's the Toronto Star. I ask questions like who's the author? Moria Welsh is an investigator reporter. Now, I don't know too much about this person, but I do want to know, can I trust this site? And some of the ways I can tell if I can trust a site is I look at to see where do they get their information from. And one of the cool things about this particular article is it actually gives credit to not only where the information comes from, but it even gives credit to who took the photographs. And that really is a professional thing because people's photographs are actually their property. It's their artwork, it's their work, and they need to get credit for it. So when a source gives credit to a source being the thing that you're using to get information, if it gives credit to where it came from, that's a really good sign. On top of that, another thing I liked about the site is it has links and it takes you to where they got the information from. So I wouldn't trust necessarily a Twitter feed to be where information is credible, but I do like that in other parts, it tells us that scientists from Environment Canada said climate change is being caused by something. I click here and it actually gives me the full report, okay? And that is a very credible site because it's not only telling me the information, it's sourcing the information, and then it's actually giving me a link so I can see where did that information come from. I don't expect you to read the full report. I think it's like something like 95 pages. Don't read that. I don't even want to read that. But it's good to know that's where they got it from. Okay, so when I'm looking at a big source or a long source, I'm looking at headlines, I'm looking at subheadings, and subheadings mean it gives you an idea of what the rest of that section is going to be about. So I have the ninja storm arrives without warning. That does not tell me too much information. There's some quotes here. That's not helping me too much. The climate is warming. That might be helpful. So if I have a question here about something to do with a warming climate, that might be the section I want to start with because it's giving me a hint. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you one last really important kind of cheat tool that's really great. When you know a site has a piece of information, maybe you've Google searched it and it says that that word choice is in the site somewhere, but you're not sure where. There's a special button called Control F, and it's a find button, and that helps you find a word in a document that's there so you can highlight it. So for example, here I know compared to 40 years ago, how many extra days does the temperature go above zero during Toronto winter months? What this question means is, compared to 40 years in the past, how many more days are we getting above zero temperatures? Because every time it goes above zero, what's happening to our snow and ice in the winter? Well, it's melting a bit more. And that's one of the reasons why we do get more flooding sometimes in the spring and the fall. But lately, as you can see from this article, this is about the summer storm of 2018. we're actually getting our most intense hard rain in the summertime. And we're getting the same amount of rain, but instead of being spread out over the entire summer months, if you think about it, what happens with rain nowadays? Well, we have days and days and days where it doesn't rain at all, and then like a couple weeks later, a big, huge downpour. And the problem with that is that our system is not built to take that much water in our sewers at the same time. So we used to have it spread out over the summer. Now it's coming in one shot, and this article is looking at all of the problems. So going back to here, if I want to know, well, where's the information about 40 years ago? I don't know. This article's massive. I'm going to press Control F, and you should get this kind of search button come up. And I'm just going to put the word 40. Okay? I know this is pretty cool, right? And it's going to highlight every time the word 40 comes. Now, I'm not going to just look at that and be like, okay, this is the answer. Great. I do have to read the paragraph to get what we call context. And that just means making sure that this is actually discussing the thing that the question is wanting. So I was right. It's under the climate is warming. So the subheading did help me. But I'm going to look here, and it says historical data shows that Toronto temperatures have increased from 1 to 1.5 degrees over the last 30 years. Okay, that doesn't seem like a lot, but 1 degree difference is enough that in areas where there's coral reefs, coral is the thing that's like in Finding Nemo, with, the fish live in it. It actually enough degrees that 2 degrees of water change can make the coral die. So a degree change in our environment can affect animals and wildlife a lot. According to here, snow melting rains are the most obvious example of why it's a problem. Compared to Toronto winters of 40 years ago, Moore said that there are now an extra 10 days when temperatures creep above zero. So here's the answer. It's an extra 10 days. So here's the answer. Now I could take that information, I can go into here, and I'll write this answer. It goes above 0, 10 extra days, period. Okay, that's it. And I'm going to do this for 8 questions that are about knowledge and understanding. Maybe using keywords from the question, using Control F to find out where they are. And one other important point about the find button is that sometimes your first keyword is not actually the keyword that fits in with what the question is wanting from you. So here I asked for 40, but the find button actually tells me, the find search bar here, tells me there's 5 times that the number 40 comes up. So let's say I read this context and in this case it was the right answer, but what if it wasn't? Then what I have to do to find the other examples is I use this arrow button, and it's going to show me other parts of the article that has that. So here is an example that it took these 2 gentlemen were rescued by Toronto police after a harrowing 40 minutes inside the flooding elevator. So there's the word 40. So if that was a keyword somewhere else, 40, I could use that. Sometimes also maybe I've used a word in the question that wasn't directly stated in the article. So don't give up if you're having trouble finding the answer by just searching for one word. Try different words from the question and try specific things. Like in this case, a vehicle got stalled. You might try the word stalled as a keyword. You could try TTC. That might come up a few times, but you can keep clicking the arrow buttons and then find which section talks about that. You could also use pictures again and headings to help you find where that information is. The last part of the activity is that I am marking. You can see the marks beside each question, is a thinking and inquiry activity. So what I really liked about this article is the fact that, I'm just going to close this find box, is that it is an interactive way, right? So not only is there videos, but there's audio here.
We stopped to try to make another 911.
So this is like an emergency situation where 2 men were trapped in an elevator and the water kept going up. Maybe you remember that from the news a couple years ago. They almost died in an elevator. So this was their account of that situation. So instead of just reading about it, this article actually let me listen to them speaking about it in an interview, which is pretty cool. But what else in choosing to communicate our ideas, we often use visuals, right? And geographers really like photos to communicate things, and not all photos are created equal, right? I can find many pictures on the internet about Toronto flooding, but not all of them are going to create the same emotional response in you as a person reading the article. So one of the questions asks you, what was a picture that you found really shocking and why did that impact you? So when you look at some of these photos, usually if I show this in class, students are like, what? The water's so high. What was it from the picture that lets you see how high the water was? Why is this photo maybe a better example of something shocking, or this one, than let's say this one that shows the TTC flooded, right? What is it about this picture that as a person you identify with and understand how serious the situation is, right? Because when you make your own assignments later in this course where you choose what kind of pictures you're putting into your Google slide or into your ARC story map, you want to think about, why am I choosing this picture? What do I want the reader to feel or get from this? Finally, the last part is, who is the author of this website? When was it published? And why was the information credible? So this goes back to the beginning of this video where we ask ourselves every time we get a new source or piece of information, before I even use it, how can I trust it, right? Because there's too much fake news in the world, and we have to be very sure that we're getting information that's accurate and truthful.